Hi.
Welcome. Welcome. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. If you're just joining us, thank you for joining us. If you've been with us most of the day, thank you for being with us most of the day as well. The last session for the evening. It's been a fantastic day. Before I introduce our fantastic guest, Nasfim, I am going to just give you a whistle stop tour of the day we had. We started the day with Nick Smith from over at All Free Media talking to us about distribution and how the best ways to approach a distributor, when to approach a distributor, and some of the deals that you can cut with a distributor. If any of these sessions you've missed, you can go to the session and click and you can watch the playbacks. We also did a mind-blowing session with mobile phone filmmaker Cassius Rayner. Amazing. And the things that you can do with mobile phones currently is just mind-blowing. And we've just had a session. We spoke to Miranda Wayland, the
Yeah.
CEO of the CDN, who's just started her job a couple of weeks ago, I think it was. And then we just spoke to Maxine Watson from African Queen. So it's been quite a day, really insightful, really inspiring. And we know it's not going to end here. Nasfim Haque, thank you so much for joining us. I'm head of BBC3, head of content at
Head of content. I
BBC3.
don't know what that means, but thank you.
You don't know what that means? Well, we're going to find out. It'd be great to find out. What we're hoping to do in this session is to find out a little bit more about you, find out a little bit more about BBC3, possibly what you're looking for, and obviously, since you're such a font of knowledge, get some advice from you for people who may want to pitch or people going through this moment. So, as always, please, guys, put your questions in chat. Actually, Lily, why don't you jump on and explain to everybody how we're going to use this facilities? I know for a few people this is a new platform, so let's just explain how we do it.
Yes, hello. I mean, most of you have been with us all day, but I do love the sound of my own voice. So here we go. Welcome to the TVC Live, and thank you very much, Nasfim. If I could turn your attention to the black bar at the top of your browser, that is the main menu for the festival. So you'll see TV Collective Live, the top left-hand corner, and then the first button you see is Schedule or Schedule, however you say it. As Simone said, the schedule allows you to set calendar reminders for future sessions, join any ongoing sessions that are happening right now. And if you have missed a session, you can replay it. So you just click it from schedule, opens up a new tab or a window for you, and you can watch it in this browser. A few buttons over is our favorite button. It's the people button. It looks like two people, sort of. And what you can, from here, you can see all the people registered to attend the festival. And you can click the button to see who's online right now with us, even if they're not in this session. And our favorite part is with the profiles, you can see there are buttons at the bottom. One of them is a little speech bubble. One of them is a box with a plus sign. The speech bubble allows you to direct message that person. And the square with a plus sign allows you to request a 10-minute meeting with them. This is done via AirMeet, our festival platform. So we don't get involved. It comes from your email address to their email address. This means you can DM or request 10 minutes of time from anybody at the festival, and that does include Nasfim, so please be responsible. If I could turn your attention to the grey menu down the right hand side of your browser, this is our in-session menu. So at the top you have the chat button where we can all get to know each other. If you have a question during the session for Simone or Nasfim that you would like Simone to ask, or you would like to come up on stage, please put it in the Q&A section. That's the little QA speech bubbles just underneath. And if there is anything that Simone or Nasfim refer to that requires further reading or a website or a link, I will put it in the resources tab, which is just one up from the bottom. It's a little pages link. And I'll probably also double post it in chat so you all have it. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lily. That's amazing. I don't want to waste further ado. And I'm like, what I've noticed in these sessions is I'm introducing everybody because we all know each other, but I'm conscious some people might know your full breadth, and I want to give you your full flowers. So, Nasfin, would you take us on a whistle stop
Oh
tour
man.
of your career?
Oh man, where to start?
Take
Where
us
to
on a whistle
start?
stop tour.
So I started out probably about, let me think, 22 years ago as a trainee at BBC Wales. So and that was having already done a degree and then a postgraduate on top. And actually one of the reasons why I didn't get into the television industry sooner was because I had no avenue in really. So I found that by doing an extra kind of degree, i.e. postgraduate, it allowed me then to kind of bolster my CV a bit to get me a bit more recognised. So I started out as a trainee, and thanks to a couple of amazing people in HR at BBC Wales who were kind of probably sort of eager to diversify. Back then, if you think about 22 years ago, the world was a different place, and they sort of recognized that that there was a need for different voices. And I still keep in touch with those two people, and they've long since left the industry. I really credit them for sort of allowing me a route in. So I joined as a trainee, and actually one of my fellow trainees was Haque, who's now at Amazon Prime. So that's how I joined, and it was what was called a kind of tri-media production trainee scheme, and it essentially was about having experience in online, television, and radio. So that's kind of the way into BBC Wales. And off the back of that, just very quickly, and I'll try and jump through the years very quickly. I kind of tried to essentially off the end of that year, you just left your own devices. And so I sort of secured short-term contract after short-term contract, working across BBC Wales, BBC Birmingham, BBC Manchester, across radio, online, local, local news, local radio, and in factual development, which is, I suppose, the bread and butter of what I do. So that was the first 7 to 8 years, and I had no staff contract at the BBC. I was literally bolstering back-to-back contracts. And then I sort of got slightly disillusioned because I was like, hang on a minute, I've been working for a long time and I'm APing and I was hitting my 30s. So that probably tells you how old I am. And then I saw an opportunity to go and work for the BBC's international development organisation called BBC Media Action, very little known part of the BBC, but they're funded very differently to the BBC, and they work all across the world in southern world countries to use media to develop communities. So I saw an opportunity working in Bangladesh because that's my heritage, working on a factual show, a bilingual factual show that went out in Bangladesh and India, and then later on in the UK. So I worked on that for 3 years, and that sort of took me abroad and then brought me back. But I thought, gosh, NGO, the world of international development, I'm going to really, find my peace here. And of course, going over there, it was, maybe you realize that the grass isn't always greener. And so I was itching to come back to mainstream television. And actually what happened in that time was that self-shooting had come in, rig shows had come in, and I realized that all my counterparts were getting incredible experience on all these brand new rig shows, big machine of shows like 24 Hours in A&E and One Born Every Minute. And I had been abroad, like doing stuff. And so I essentially started freelancing for 7 years, and that took me to some of the biggest production companies. And off the back of that, joined Channel 4 as an assistant commissioner 7 years ago. And then that sort of led me to BBC3 today, where at the BBC in the last 7 years, I've been everything from a short form commissioner to a commissioning editor in factual entertainment, and now sort of looking after BBC3 day to day. So I hope that was kind of succinct enough, although it's probably quite long, but that's
That was wonderful. No, that was very impressive. That was extremely impressive. How long have you been at BBC3 as head of content?
So now, gosh, let me think. Was it last February? February before, I think. So probably 2 years now, coming up to 2 years.
Coming up
So
to
yeah, and it's
2 years. Head of content.
Yeah. So head of content is essentially a kind of way of saying the head of day to day on the channel. So looking after commissioning and deliveries, and really kind of being there, so a port of call for all our sort of commissioning genres, and that's across unscripted and scripting, having like a macro view on things. So one of the things I realized, and actually chatting to a colleague in the BBC who's got a very similar role but in radio, we were saying how when you're a commissioning editor, you're quite into your projects. So you're quite into, this is my one title with my talent and the production company, and you can't zoom out and see where this might fit in the portfolio, where it might fit on the BBC, and how it's being marketed against all the other titles releasing at that time. Whereas a role like this one enables me to have a much more macro view. It's like, okay, what's happening on BBC3 in a half year? What have we released? What we prioritizing marketing for? Where are we putting our money? Does that cover the range of and breadth of the UK and the different kind of communities got to serve? So it's a much more macro view. So you're not in the nuts and bolts of like making something or developing ideas, although you have a view obviously on these things because you're sitting in all the commissioning meetings, but you definitely see the overview. And I think that is really helpful.
Yeah, to get a real kind of strategy look at
Yeah.
the kind of channel and the direction it's moving in. How do you think working across the various different platforms, you've worked across radio, you've worked online, you've worked in digital, How do you think that that's prepared you for your current role, or some of the lens that you've taken into this current role?
Yeah, I mean, look, I sort of think, at the time when you're going through, like, trying to find your next contract, and you're in your 20s, it's all a bit of a slog, isn't it, really? But I don't think, and I'm a big believer in things happening for a reason. I don't think I would have got to here if I didn't do that stuff, right? So it's definitely useful, and I think when you land up at a place like the BBC, it's all about understanding the organisation, and so I'm always amazed at how much more BBC experience I have than a lot of my colleagues, because I've worked in the nation's region, so I've genuinely worked on the floor at BBC Manchester on Oxford Road when it was in Oxford Road before it moved. I've worked on the floor in Asian Programmes Unit. BBC Birmingham, I used to work on the fourth floor of the old broadcasting house in Llandaff in Cardiff. Like, I can genuinely speak for those kind of cultures and remits. So I definitely think it helps, because if you want a long-term career and a senior career at the BBC, I think you need to understand the organisation. You've got to understand the organisation for what it does and how it serves the licence fee paying public. So really
Okay.
useful, actually. But I can only say that now when I'm in a reasonably decent place. At the time, it's a slog, right?
But yeah, with hindsight, we would all be wiser, right? But the fact, like you said, each of those experiences have kind of shaped you and prepared you for this moment, as life always does,
Yeah,
right? As life does.
yeah.
What are some of the key challenges um, that you've had in your career? And then I want to also kind of back that with some of the most rewarding moments as well.
Sure. Yeah. I think the challenges are, like, and we've all been there, and we might be working with people and teams who and at a time in the world where there was not an understanding of inclusivity in the way that there is now. And still, as we've got a long way to go as society, right? But if you think about how life was, we're talking about early 2000s, it's a very different world, and that's when I started out. And so, without going into too much detail, it's the challenges of, you might have a manager who doesn't get you, or kind of teams where perhaps you feel slightly excluded. And I think I'd like to think that we've definitely moved on and changed since then. But I think those have been the real challenges. And interestingly, I sort of think, okay, society has definitely changed. We as an industry has definitely changed for the good. Of course, there's always room for everyone to kind of, improve. But when I look back and I think, God, I wish it's only easy for me to say now, I wish I'd called that out at the time. But that's only it's easy for me to say in my 40s now, right? And when we have open conversations about diversity and inclusion. But back then there wasn't even that label. Like, there wasn't even the words diversity and inclusion, if you think about it. And the world was a different place. There was no TikTok, there was no social media. But I do look back and I think I wish I'd called it out. And I'm a big believer in principle as well, and maybe that comes as I'm in a much more secure place and I have, brilliant employers that I have, to call it out gets a lot easier, like things that you think, okay, I'm not sure about this, but I suppose when you're sort of in your 20s and you're on, like, I don't know, 14K or whatever, I don't think it's very easy to call things out. But the challenges are the usual ones, I guess, in your early part of your career. If you're a person of color, there's certain feelings and certain kind of teams and views that you've been with. So yeah.
Mm. And I think there's more of a community now. So when we're starting out, there would be less people like you that are
Yeah.
around, or less people like me. So just having more people to lean on and speak. Or there was a sense of it could only be us. There could only be one. I think that there's a change in terms of how the community is supporting. Or I'd like to think there's been a change. I don't know. Have you noticed that? Has there been a change in terms of how the community of, creators of color or people working in the TV industry of that of color, how they're supporting each other? Or do you still think that that's a challenge or
Yeah,
something we need?
definitely. I think definitely people are a lot more collaborative, open to that conversation. I mean, I met one supplier today. I know their work, but I had no idea that they're both South Asian heritage. And actually, I salute them for, kind of, I suppose, quietly going about their business and working with some of the biggest names in the industry in terms of kind of comedy talent. Um, of course, their names kind of give away what their heritage might be, but I had no idea that that's what it was them that did that stuff, and it's amazing because we're all part of that kind of overall aim for better inclusivity, better representation. So I definitely feel like, yes, you can have those conversations more openly. We're a lot more collaborative. We don't pull up the drawbridge as a community. But of course, I'm always itching for everyone to do more. That's the thing. And, anyone who knows me knows that's what I'm about. I don't feel, and maybe again, and I say this because I know I'm speaking from a place of privilege, being in a role when a lot of people are out of work. I totally get it, but I sort of feel like I have nothing to lose by another person who perhaps might feel excluded or from an underserved community getting a role. Like I have nothing to. It's not going to threaten my position, right? It's just not. So and maybe sometimes because we're in the thick of it, some people can't see the wood for the trees, and I wish more people could in that way. I'm not saying I'm a martyr by all means. I'm not. I wish I could do more, but it's. I do feel like you know it'll only be good if more of us got involved in that way. But sometimes it is hard because a lot of us, I totally get that the industry right now, it's hard to sustain long-term kind of income, if you like, for some people. So yeah, it's definitely
I was
better.
gonna, I was gonna ask, and I think that leads really nicely to what's keeping you up at night currently.
Oh gosh, generally, or I mean, I tend to sleep quite well because I'm often just knackered. But I mean, look, the world's a changing place at the moment, and I think it's thinking about what can you add to the conversation, um, and that nothing should be taken for granted. Like we're in a place, or I'm in a place right now where, yeah, there's some great content out there that I've definitely had a hand in shaping, including please everyone go and watch Mabeen Azhar's two-part series that we've just dropped on iPlayer tonight. Really proud of that. And so I always think, what can we add to that, ecosystem of conversation? Like, we've got a platform, the BBC is the biggest media brand in the world. How can you add to the conversation? So the world's a better place, right? That's in an ideal world, that's what I think about. But also, I'm not a student anymore, so I don't have these kind of utopian dreams that I used to have as a student. At a basic level, I kind of think it's kind of a bit like what I was saying in my previous point, which is, it's tricky right now for a lot of creatives to get, sustained work. And so the thing that does give me a bit of a reward and a positive reward, and I think about it quite a bit, is how do I get more people who don't have those opportunities into the industry? I genuinely care about. Like, I think if I'm really honest, that is probably one of my sole drivers. Because being a commissioner is not. It's nice being commissioned. You commission whatever, but you don't know. I've done it a few times. But the thing that I'm really rewarded by is when somebody says, "Oh, thanks for sending my CV on. And you know what? I'm now employed by X." And I'm like, "Oh, you know what? That's because you're great. You're brilliant. You just didn't have that. You didn't have the know-how to contact that person." So, I had a nice experience last week. Somebody sent me an email going, "Oh, thank you. I'm just about to work on one of BBC3's biggest shows. Don't want to name drop, but BBC3's biggest shows. And it's because you sent my CV, and so I managed to meet that person." And so that makes me feel good. And she's definitely not somebody from a community that, we often see on television. So I'm really happy about that. So yeah, I do think about
Yeah,
that a lot, because I think actually ultimately, what is this industry for if it's not kind of, shaping people's ideas and views of the world?
it's just
Yeah.
important to have a wide range of voices. Nasfim, what are you currently watching at the moment?
Oh my god! Oh my gosh! Now you're testing me. So it's the usual stuff. I'm going to be brutally honest with you. Finished watching Perfect Couple. I sort of, when I'm feeling sad, I watch a little bit of Emily in Paris. What else? I do watch a lot of current affairs on the BBC. So I finished watching the two-parter about Saudi Arabia. Watched the Mohammed Al Fayed doc. What else? I watch a range. If I'm honest, I watch a lot of TikTok as well. So do like a good restocking video on TikTok. It's always good.
Mm,
But a range of stuff. And I just finished
mm,
watching Angry Young Men, the documentary series about the Bollywood writing duo.
mm,
So yeah,
mm,
finished watching that. So there's a
mm.
range of stuff, but that's in between everything that we've had having delivered into the BBC, into BBC3. I have to watch that stuff as well. So it's like finding time to watch this stuff.
Finding the time to watch,
Yeah,
cram
yeah,
all this stuff in, right? To watch all
yeah,
the stuff.
yeah. I
What do
often watch it in the day.
is
Go
there
on.
anything that you've seen out there currently that you wish that BBC Three that your channel had commissioned or should have been on BBC Three?
No, it's an interesting one because I think I've had it been asked before, and I always answer very diplomatically about it. Because the truth is, like, it hasn't been commissioned on BBC3 because there's often a reason, i.e., it's not British, it's not young, it's so there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I like out there, but I totally get why we wouldn't commission it, and I wouldn't want us to have commissioned it. When you think about what I just said about, what's the purpose of what we do, right? But there are some stories I wish we got on. Like, I don't want to point to specifics, but I sort of wish there were some stories that we got on sooner, so the representation is really interesting, or I sort of know that certain kind of creatives in the industry that I know would have understood that community, or would have understood that point of view. So, but I suppose I'm answering in a very diplomatic way, but the truth is there isn't much out there, because we do what we do, and I'm really proud of the stuff that we do. And I suppose it's unrealistic for me to say, oh yes, I wish I'd commissioned that really big series of David Beckham, because that's just not what
Yeah.
we're going to do with BBC3, is it? I mean, so yeah,
Mm.
I think that would be the honest answer, because it just wouldn't be a fair answer, because we're comparing apples and pears. So
And
yeah,
you're, and like you said, you do what you do, and you do it well, and you're really
yeah, yeah.
proud of that. Why did BBC3 come back to linear? I know that there's been kind of conversation around that, but why did it come back from digital? It seems to be doing really well on digital. Why did it come back on to linear? And kind of given the current climate or where we're at, do we think that that was still a great idea?
So when we say coming back to linear, the truth is it's when we went to linear, we reopened that linear platform. It was, truthfully viewed as a brilliant, cost-effective way to reach underserved audiences, because the data showed us that there were people out there, BBC license fee paying public, who weren't always on demand, and so it's a cost-effective way of reaching them. We don't see it as a a reversion back to linear, because we ultimately are an on-demand platform, and so I have to stress this: we are iPlayer first. That is what we say, and so when people kind of pitch to us, and when I meet suppliers, and whenever we put out creative briefs, we always say, look, think about how your idea would fit on demand. What would it look like on a thumbnail and with a title? What would it say to the person scrolling on iPlayer? So in all honesty, like, the linear part of it is another sort of shop window for us to kind of showcase our titles. And it's really, like, it's really hard to get people to notice your stuff. And I always remember a very well-known TV exec saying, when this person left the BBC, they said, look, Nas, you don't realize this until you leave the industry, but nobody gives a monkey about your program. They just don't care in the outside world that you really care. But once you leave and return to real life, actually you're fighting for eyeballs. And so I met this person after they left the BBC, and they're a very well-known person, and I always remember them saying that as we were eating pizza at lunchtime, and I was thinking, actually, they're so right. Like, we always think it's our project, our baby's like the biggest thing on the planet, and everyone's watching it. And actually, so little is big. And it was interesting watching the NTAs the other week, because that's probably a real honest kind of view on what is big currently. Those are the shows that are big, the ones on the NT. That's what is big, and that is what British television is, right? That is probably a good snapshot of mainstream British television. So yeah, yeah, I think that's an honest answer to that, really.
No. I think that's great. How kind of, like, as kind of head of content, how do you kind of chip in, or how do you help shape or decide which stories, which voices? How do you kind of shape the tone of the channel? What's that? Give us just a little bit of an overview of that process.
Yeah, so we have a commissioning slate. We've got a budget. I'm very much involved in the unscripted part of it. Scripted is kind of very much led by the specialist commissioning teams in comedy and drama. Although we do feed in steers and insight quite a bit from a kind of audience and platform research point of view. But with unscripted, we have a commissioning slate, and I can see that. I can see how much money we've got across which genres. And we have routine meetings with all the different commissioning teams, and that's fact ent, current affairs, entertainment, and documentary. So we meet them on a routine basis, and the commissioning editors in those teams will kind of pitch to us the best of what they've got, bearing in mind our filter, which is, unashamedly stories, representing the voices and the views of under 35s across the UK. That's the filter, I guess. And we're talking about British stories, and we're probably more likely to go local than some of our SVOD competitors. So that's the filter, and that's the process. Yes, people, you can probably imagine, suppliers all the time email myself and Fiona Campbell, who's our controller in chief, and they'll want a meeting, and paid for by the public, so I obviously try to meet people. And if there's something that sticks and I like, then I sort of try to siphon it off to the best genre and the best commissioning editor who's got a bit of headspace to have a look at it. And so one of the things that I feel like I have working channel size, we have that kind of macro view, as I've said, but also we're more likely to take an overall view on what have we got more of, what have we got less of, what can we do with more of, what voices and views are we missing, where's the money, where are we in the UK? So it's like sometimes we've got that view and we can then kind of go to the genre and say, have a think about this, have a look at this. Can I introduce you to X, see what they've got? This could, this could work for us on the channel, or this may not work for us, but can you look at what they've got elsewhere? Do you know what I mean? So it's definitely, we're definitely involved in shaping, and I'm definitely involved in shaping that stuff, and what comes to routine, what comes to the commissioning kind of agenda, if you like. And when it comes to the meetings, it'll often be myself, sometimes Fiona, sitting in on those, leading those, and the commissioners will pitch and we'll go yay or nay. That's pretty much how it works. So it's quite it may seem like a long process, but I think when the ideas are right, it's not that long-winded process. And we're quite collaborative. So we've got we can talk about the team. I'm on my own, if I'm going to be brutally honest with you. However, from a kind of channel point of view, our sort of stakeholders, people like social team, marketing team, we have an audiences person who really gets involved in terms of audiences and insight and market trends, and we also have our scheduler, and they're like the key people that sort of get involved, as well as the money person. I forget them, but they're super important, and they'll kind of say where the money might be, what we're missing, where we might have a gap, what how could we play this against other things, what the trends are, is it something we've got too much of. So those are the people that I might just go, oh, have a look at this before the agenda, before we go to the routine, have a look at this agenda, see what you think. So yeah.
Wonderful. Please, guys, don't forget to put your questions in chat. We had a session last week with the head of global insights from Fremantle, and it was quite well, it was probably really obvious, but we're hearing it quite surprising how much commissioners are kind of leaning on data. And I think Camille over at UK TV talked a little bit about it, algorithms and the data and stuff like that. Is that kind of really informing a lot of your decisions right now? Yeah, how
Yeah,
you've seen it? Is it?
yeah, it is. However, we have the privilege of being paid for by the public, and that comes with lots of responsibility. And so, yes, data is really important, but we understand some pieces might do a different role for us, without sort of citing titles, because obviously the suppliers aren't here to talk about their titles. There are some titles where perhaps it might get a smaller audience, but, they're bringing in, a high proportion of young from, Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities. And so, you're not going to throw a title like that out, out the door. So you've got to look at data in a kind of, in a much more sort of deeper way. You can't just go, okay, that's given us, overall performance. It's, I don't know, 1.5 million, whatever per ep. You've got to look at it as what, in a much more deeper, granular way, like who is coming to the table? Is it a similar kind of audience? Because imagine if it was all about just big data, you could end up with basically a channel where all you're doing is serving the Southeast, right? So that could be where your data takes you, because they're probably more likely to be people with a license fee, might come to BBC, might come to iPad, do you know what I mean? I'm not saying they are, and that's what our data is saying, but I'm just saying that if you're just taking it at top level, you could end up in a space that's quite unnuanced. So yes, you have to take it. You have to sort of really drill down into what that data is actually telling us, because it's all against spend. So yeah.
Do you think that commissioners, and I know that I'm going to kind of get back to BBC3 and Seb, I see your question, I will get to it. Do you think commissioners maybe in the near future will be more data analysis rather than commissioners? Do you think that we'll get to a point where they're really kind of leaning in to data, or that the role will change slightly as the kind of emergence of more data, technology, AI, and all that kind of stuff? Yeah, do you think the role?
I think,
And if so,
I'll be honest here, I feel like you'll always need humans, because in that, like if you listen to even, will.i.am on AI, you'll always need the creative kind of beginnings of something, and that only comes from the human mind and the human experience, So I'm not, if you're asking me in a nutshell, if I'm worried that my job's going to be automated, no, probably not. But you never say never. Right? It's like, I mean, for the next few years, I think we might be okay, right? But it's interesting because we have seen some. I'm not saying they're real pictures, but we've seen some kind of mocked up pictures of what AI written treatments might look like. And actually, for now, it's pretty, it's pretty crude. You can tell when it's AI written. It's kind of it's really not from the heart, right? So,
Mm.
so it's like I'm not really worried about that. I think because ultimately, I think you've got to use data in a very nuanced way. I know that's like a terrible media word, but I think it's exactly what I just said before, which is it could take, if you just go for data, it'll take you to a place that could be just one note. So you might as well use data in the mix of things, because you still need humans to fight for like certain representation, or because we all know that there are also biases in data
Exactly.
usage, right? So like you'll still need humans, and I think that's why all our voices are more valuable than ever as we do
Absolutely.
become slightly more kind of
Cool.
AI
Actually,
driven.
as I see that time is rolling, I want to make sure that people get
Yeah.
enough time to ask questions. So I'm going to invite Seb on stage. Sebastian, are BBC3 running any programs for directors trying to get into scripted, drama or comedy, shadowing or otherwise? Alternatively, what are the best shows to approach? And Seb has joined us on
There
stage.
you go.
Seb, you
Thanks,
can.
Seb.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to if I answer that eloquently enough, or whether you want to elaborate on that anymore. So, and if you can, turn on your camera. I know people are having problems with their camera today. It takes a few minutes to kick in, but we can hear you. You're not on mute, so we could probably hear you. There he is. Wonderful. Good to see you,
Hello.
Seb.
Oh, can't hear.
Oh, Seb, we can't hear you. We're not quite sure what's going on. We turn. You all plugged in on that side? Do you want to have a minute to see what's going on and I call you back up? I saw Emil's got a question. Oh, Seb's there. Let me call up Emil while Seb's sorting that out, and then I'll call Seb back up in a second. Emil, let's invite you. For commercial companies, we'll have to find creative solutions. Oh, no, okay. It's exactly that. Sorry, he's just making a comment, which I totally agree with. I think that we can all agree that it's kind of, at this moment, kind of fueling creatives. And I think it's it can be a really useful tool. And with everything, right? But it's just once you don't rely on it, I think it's when you become lazy and rely solely on it that it then becomes. I noticed that, Emil, it wasn't a question, it was a statement. Sorry, my bad. I thought you were asking a question. BBC3 has made some of the most forward-thinking, creative, and inclusive content. Was that the ethos before you joined, or was that something you've kind of pushed and really championed whilst being in the role?
Oh, I wouldn't want to take credit for all of it. It's definitely, I think it's just the ethos of BBC3. If you think about a channel that's focused on 16 to 34-year-olds across the UK, that filter takes you to a place where, you're naturally looking at a different kind of generation, different views, and then how recent times have really shaped those views. So it's definitely not just me. There have been brilliant kind of people at the helm of BBC3 in the past sort of 7 and 10 years. But I think when you work with, it's quite a young team, as in the stakeholders that I mentioned. They may not be my team as such because they're all working at different, across different parts of the BBC, but they're generally, I would say, on the whole, they're quite young, they're quite diverse. And so that definitely means that there's no dominant voice in the conversation. Like, like I'm very used to having kind of, people who are probably about 20 years younger than me, I'm guessing, but they're quite happy to and confident and, pleasant enough to tell me what they like watching, what they didn't like about a show that we put out there. And, it's hard, it can be hard to take, me and my ego, I can sometimes think, oh, why are they saying that about one of our pieces of content? But, I welcome their view because I sort of think, well, they're more likely to be in the demographic that we want to serve than not. They're more likely to kind of be living the very real experience of being young in the UK right now. So, I should hear their view, even if it's a tough view, because it reminds me of the competitive world that we're kind of dropping content into.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Okay.
it's yeah.
Okay, cool. Seb, you're with us. You're back with
There you
us.
go.
Mike sorted, looking handsome on camera as usual. You want to go ahead and ask your question? Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hi, thank you for your for being here, firstly. And my question is it's regarding sort of transferring from, as I am like a mostly short form and factual director, into scripted drama or comedy dramedy or whatever, and whether BBC3 has any specific programs, schemes for that, shadowing or otherwise. And then secondly, if it doesn't, what programs, what series, films, whatever, would be the best ones to approach?
It's quite a big question. I won't have all the information to hand now. It's worth dropping me a note, and I can make sure that I pull together all the bits of information, because various shows are in production at various stages at the minute. So if you want to drop me a note, that's probably the best way, because I can collate all that info and put it in one place for you, rather than giving you wrong info off the top of my head. But I'm sure if I put you in touch with some of the production companies making some of our stuff, it would be a start for you to kind of get on the track of finding something. So yeah, drop me a note if you want. I don't know if you've got my email address or whether that can be shared.
It will be shared. If you're
Thank
we'll
you.
definitely make sure people can share. Thanks so much, Seb. That was a great question.
Yeah, no, thanks.
We've got a question from Avril, and she says she can't come on stage because she's currently en route somewhere. Naz, can you say that? Yeah, Nasfim, can you
Yeah,
see that? So yeah, hi Nasfim. With shows like Domino's Ace, Grime Kids, and Borders successful regarding ratings and intended audiences?
yeah. I mean, look,
Ratings.
we're not at liberty to share data, particularly not of titles against each other, because obviously they came from different contexts and different production companies. But often when we look at shows where it's very pointed towards a particular community, we find that yes, they skew towards a particular community, because the audience, even though it's a battle for audiences, the audience will know, wow, that's for me, because who you see on a thumbnail, who you see on the marketing material. So that there's interesting data learnings from all those three shows. Borders is definitely an interesting one, and actually it's probably one for Seb to kind of connect with, the makers of Borders, Julia Lambert, because that's coming back for a second series, and that's been an incredible success for us. So but with both Domino Day, Grime Kids, and you'll see it in comedy with things like Juice and Dream Mars Black, and we all notice it. It's like, the old thing of like back in the day, if you saw a person of color on television, you scream and the whole household will come and watch. It's a version of that in today's world, even though it's slightly more busier, where, if we see marketing materials where it's somebody who looks like me, we're more likely to go and want to watch that. And so the data definitely kind of holds with that kind of hypothesis, which is, if you see something that looks like you or is from your world, you're more likely to sit there and watch it. And it's the same with, like, let's say if you set stuff in places out of London, like in the Midlands, or we've just done a series about UFC fighters in Liverpool, and we've definitely seen that there's an uptick in those areas. So there are data learnings, but I can't give too much detail away, Avril, because that's for the production companies to kind of mull over. But yeah, there's always value in doing those titles, I think, if that's the answer to your question.
Fantastic. I know you spoke a little bit about it before, but how does pitching work at your level? Do you see pitches, pitch commissioners that are mostly? Yeah, just explain, how does that process work? Your commissioners pitch to you, and I know you said you take a more strategic approach, but it'd be interesting to see how you feed into that process.
Yeah, so the pitches, sort of shortlisted pitches, come in on an emailed agenda by the commissioning team ahead of any meeting. So it gives us a bit of time as a team to kind of regroup and see what we think. And we might do that on email, we might do it in person if we get to sort of see each other on Teams or Zoom or whatever it is. And you'd be surprised how much there is, dissent, right? If there are some things we don't like, but I'm definitely not shy to say if I don't like something. But I think it's kind of good as a team between myself, the scheduler, the audience person, even Fiona, if she wants to get involved, we'll say what we think, because often it's better to be in alignment before we kind of go cold, particularly now, because when you're doing meetings on Zoom or Teams, it can be sort of read in a different way. So it's better to sort of be aware of what other person on your team might think before you run into a meeting. So we would have often kind of said on email, oh, we like that documentary about, I don't know, for argument's sake, weight loss jabs or whatever it is. And then we might say, oh, should we think about maybe asking them to look at a different presenter on it, so just to give an example, Priya Rai from Newsbeat presented a documentary that we did about Ozempic. not long ago. So, and that came out of us saying, oh, should, you know, to make that really worthwhile for us, should we think about a different voice on screen? Who would that be? Where would they come from? They might help us market the topic in a particular way, or the content in a particular way. So we have that discussion, and you know, I would say my voice is very equal to everyone else's voice. I mean, it might sound like, okay, you know, she's head of content at BBC3, her voice rules, but at that moment, I would definitely hear what my colleagues are saying. They're more likely to be in the age demographic than I am. Probably the departure point might come where they may not necessarily be across the strategic elements. So, you know, they might like a particular topic, but we might, as a channel, be fully jam-packed with that topic. So for argument's sake, you know, we might get some ideas around drag, for instance, and everyone might say, oh, that's a great idea. And I'll be like, well, hang on a minute. You know, we do have a really massive show called Drag Race. You know, it's like, do we want to be doing more? You know, that's the biggest show. Do you want to be doing more? So I might come in with the more strategic side of that. And in that instance, yes, you know, I'll be able to kind of weigh in on that quite heavily. But, you know, I'm very interested in their voices for, like, you know, documentaries, current affairs that we're doing, Fact Dent, newer pieces, because I actually want to hear what they think, what the wider team think. I mean, I'm not saying that I put it out to like loads of people to give an opinion, but there's definitely 3 or 4 people that I think before we even go into commissioning meeting, I'll solicit opinion from, and then when we go to that meeting, we're kind of unified, and then we might sort of then share. I might throw to them to give their point of view from whether that's scheduling or business end or audience insight, and then they can sort of give their sort of points to consider to the commissioners. And some things are a straight no, which is the easiest and quickest, and some things are okay, but think about talent, think about where you might land it, think about, you know, could you tweak it so it's slightly more inclusive, or can you tweak it to this, can you, you know, or it's very much like, okay, maybe here's 10K, think about some development, see if it really stacks up. So it is a collaborative process, but, you know, maybe I suppose my role is just to be a bit more macro about it. You know, like I'm really conscious, just, you know, naturally, and because, you know, we're here together in the safe space, I'm really conscious about representation. So if I see, you know, something that we're already quite well served, I kind of pull the team back going, I know you like this, but can we think about X, Y, and Z? And so we've definitely had a few of those recently. And I think I would say it's fair to say that I've been, if it wasn't for me to being there, I don't know if those kind of checks and balances would have been in place. Not because there are oversights on other, but it's just that I suppose that it comes from experience. It comes from being somebody who's got quite alive to certain topics and issues in the world. So,
and that's why the importance of having creative teams, right? So everybody has or having different diverse teams, so everybody can bring something unique to the table or see some blind spots that others don't see. So
exactly.
we are glad that they have you on the team. Let's we've got another question from Sharon, and I'm going to invite Sharon on stage, and let us know whether you can join us. Sharon is coming. She's a coming. Sharon, Naz, can you see that? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Sorry. So are you still commissioning 8 times 60 drama series? And if so, what kind of budgets would BBC3 want to make for it? She has a drama. She's please do not pitch. We don't try and pitch to
I wasn't going to pitch.
Yeah,
I wasn't going to pitch. Don't worry. I just said that's all I was giving away.
Please don't. Well, answer your question there yourself. All right, go ahead. Do you want to answer your question about 8 times 60?
So it was literally that question, which is I've got a series that's 8 times 60, but I don't know if it's something that you're even considering as BBC based on, you know, for BBC3 based on budgets, whether an 8 times 60 is something that works for BBC3, or whether you'd go for maybe 45, I don't know, or only doing 30s. So it's just to get an idea and insight into your sort of commissioning motivation, whether scripted drama and pure drama is something that you would take.
Cool. So the best way to answer that question is by saying you should definitely redirect that with a pitch to the drama commissioning team. So it's very hard for me to talk about money, and I wouldn't talk about money without knowing editorial. I suppose the short answer to what I think you might be asking is, does duration matter? The answer is no if the editorial's right. So so it's not necessarily about the duration, it's about the editorial. Does that fit for what we're looking for in terms of drama across the BBC for young audiences? That's the question. So don't get fixated on the duration thing.
No, I wasn't. It was more I wasn't. It was more that I suppose I just wanted to know whether it is a category that you would do, but also I think it's for me it's the money, because it's not like glossy flashy, but it's like, but it would still need some money. But just dramas are just very expensive, so I don't know if it's in the remit of whether BBC3 even sort of really how many they would do in a year. Do you know what I mean? If there's that sort of budget generally on the overview of everything, to think, can we invest quite a lot in a drama series that's of scale, I suppose. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm not understanding. Do you not take commissions directly from BBC3? Is it
So I said
everything
at the
through the
start,
genre? Is it through
sure.
the
So
genre?
yeah, so with scripted, is whilst we have a sort of macro view in terms of the channel, I work with Fiona Campbell, who's our controller. With scripted, it's the best way to pitch is via the commissioning teams. That's John Petrine in comedy and Lindsay Salt in drama. So because they're commissioning editors are specialists in that, they have a much more broader view of drama spend in the BBC and comedy spend in the BBC. So your best bet is to talk to them with your idea. And then, of course, then conversations about money follows if the idea is right. So that would be the best way to work.
Okay, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much, Sharon. What can we expect to see on BBC3 in the coming year, early next year? Is there any kind of highlights, anything exciting that you can tell us about?
And so I'll only speak from the ones that we've announced, but look out for obviously a returning series. Man Like McBean's coming back. That's a 5th series. That's amazing. We've got Rap Game coming back in Unscripted. That's amazing. And that's a real brilliant one because it's been running for, I think, 5-6 years now. So that's excellent. It's a real testament to that team and that production. We've got Border Series 2 coming back. So I hope that's bigger and better. Got Juice, Marwan Rizwan series, comedy series coming back as well. So those are some of our biggest shows. We've got a big series, obviously Drag Race, Glow Up as well. And then I don't want to speak too much because we haven't announced, but we've got a raft of like brilliant current affairs documentaries coming up. One of which is the Mabine Azhar series, which I've mentioned earlier on, and I think that's just an excellent piece of journalism. Very timely. It was commissioned way before everything kicked off this summer, and that's a good example of something where the tenacity of that production company and that journalist to say no, this is the right story to follow. And like even 10 months ago, we didn't think we couldn't quite see the wood for the trees on that story. And of course, look what happened over the summer. So we've got some amazing current affairs coming up actually with a range of new names and faces, but it's not announced, so we're not going to say too much.
So it sounds exciting.
Yeah,
sounds exciting. We have a question from Natty. Invite Natty on stage. Can you see that question? Natty is come backstage. Let's see. Yeah. Hello. Okay, Natty, you're on stage. You can go ahead. Please ask the question yourself.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you. Hi, Nasfim. Thank you for accepting me. What I want to ask you is, when picking up something that's like culturally sensitive, but it's been like commissioned, and like you guys like love the storyline, but things need to be tweaked and shaped. Like, how is that navigated between like the organization and the creator, or the commissioner, or whoever's in charge and the creator? Like, how is that navigated?
That's a really good question. Thank you. I mean, there are various points anyway when you're sort of looking after a production or you've commissioned a production where the commissioner, the designated commissioner in the genre, has got like checking in moments. So obviously it comes backstage, you might have a script stage or, editorial synopsis stage and the commissioning spec, which is a document you sign as a contract between us and the independent supplier when they get commissioned. You've got then, there might be various stages and various sort of check-ins. And generally when you get something commissioned, you should be having regular meetings with your commissioner. So, I'm not, like I said, my role doesn't mean that I'm involved in those kind of regular check-ins, otherwise my diary would be mad. But there should be regular check-ins, and there should be, that commissioner hopefully then sort of gives us the updates in every single sort of routine meeting that we have with a genre, whether that's fact ent or current affairs or documentaries or whatever. So that's when we get updates from them, and that may mean that they show us a snippet of something. They might share a kind of outline of how that film might look, who the list of contributors are, where they're going to film. And if there's something that we feel like isn't right, well, that's our opportunity essentially, because you'd hope that in that production process there'd be enough kind of moments to kind of check in, because commissioning editors doing that anyway, and
Yeah.
that they're feeding back to you internal routines, because their head of genre would be kind of facilitating that, so that they tell the channel. And also, you know, my role, I guess, you know, in many ways, even when it's a bit quiet, the truth is what I should be doing, and what I hope I do, is I do kind of tend to email out to commissioners going, how's it going on next? You know, we've got something at the moment that's an international series, in fact, with Ashley Kane, the ex-footballer. They've just been out filming in Sweden, and they're off to, I can't remember, somewhere dangerous next. And so, you know, today I just emailed, you know, Ricky, the amazing commissioner, is looking after it, in fact. But, you know, I thought, you know what, I want to know how they're doing. So I emailed team director and went, hey guys, you know, at True North, how's it going? You know, who have you got? If you want staff, I've got some amazing stuff, you know. So, and actually, you know what, sometimes
Yeah.
production companies really appreciate hearing from you at the channel. So I'm a bit nosy, and I guess that's my job, to check in. So if there's anything that we don't like, or anything that we think, oh, that's not quite what we expected, we all
Yeah.
say it then. And then of course you get to see a rough cut,
Yeah.
and again you build that in from the outset. And you know,
Has
there
there
are
ever been like, has there ever been like a chance where like a creator has felt like felt like completely like compromised, where I don't know, they feel like their story's being sacrificed from those tweaks, or you know, like they are coming from a certain background where they feel like, no, like this needs to be in here, like to like, has that ever been the case? Or
I'm sure it has been. I mean, you know, I've had those experiences as a commissioning editor, and even working as a supplier. But you sort of, I guess it's like you win some and lose some on those battles, I
yeah,
think,
yeah,
in
yeah,
truth, you know. And
yeah,
also, we're coming at it from what would work on our platform, what would
yes,
work on the BBC iPlayer.
yeah,
And I suppose if there's one request that I'd ask of suppliers, is I know it's incredibly hard to get a commission. It's incredibly hard time at the moment,
mhm,
to stay employed and be employed. But what I would say is, when you're in that position, like, be on, of course, be honest. Tell us what you really mean and intended by what you're working on. But equally, you know, there are some battles that I think it's okay to lose if it means the greater good. And
yeah,
you know, I've definitely learned that. That's something I've learned in my career, which is you can't fight everything.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I mean, again, I don't want to name check stuff, but you know, there are some titles where it's a greater good of having that title, but I might not have won, you know, I might not have won that sort of edit note about, I don't know, they didn't do X at the end of that scene, and I might not have won that note, and I'd have to, you know, put in an extra few seconds to, you know, to wrap up someone senior's editorial notes. But I've kind of learned that you've got to let it go, because the wider thing is, look, they've commissioned this person, they would never have been commissioned, right?
yes, yes, yeah,
So I've
yeah,
kind of learned, I think that is a real big learning, though, learning which battles to let go of. And don't,
yeah,
I wouldn't say lose, I mean, it's let go of, because you'll be the bigger person. But, you know, what I do say to people, and I have got some very specific examples, but it's not the right place to talk about them, where, you know, and I'm not talking about BBC examples, where yes, there are some things where it's been really upon principle, you know, I'm not agreed with, or whatever that is. And, you know, there's always a time and place to raise those, and you should. I think people will respect your views, and particularly now when there's such a, you know, such a quest for inclusivity.
yes,
But you know, if it's small stuff, I would say to people, listen to the other point of view. And if it's about marketing, often it's about marketing and promotion. If I'm going to be really honest with you, like, you know, people are worried about the kind of promotion materials, people are worried about, you know, the kind of marketing, you know, how much time they're getting for X, Y, and Z, why they're not getting a trail. And some of that stuff is a lot more centrally driven than you think. It's about kind of overall big picture, and it's even driven by big marketing teams, big social teams at the BBC. It's not just about your little project in one
yeah,
part of the BBC, and it's
yeah,
reminding the supplier that that's the case.
yeah, yeah. Thank
And
you,
it's important. I
yeah,
think it's thank you, Natty. That
thanks a
was
lot.
really good. I think, and it's an important reminder, isn't it, to pick your battles, know what you're fighting for, why you're fighting for it, kind of what opportunities, not just think of things in isolation. Bigger picture approach is always important. How long are you currently commissioned up to, and what are you missing
Um,
currently?
I mean, we don't really sort of view it as that. If the idea is right, honestly, we'll find a way. Like,
Okay.
so don't, like, I really hate
Wonderful.
sort of giving specifics on that, because I'm not. I'm not stopping myself from meeting people and seeing new ideas, because that'd be the wrong thing to do. Because if you think about by the time by the time you commission something, and the time it takes to make something and deliver it, easily 9-10 months, nearly a year can go by, right? So we should always be on the lookout for the next thing. So in answer to that question, there is the scope to hear new ideas all the time. So yeah, and what was the second part of that question?
What are you currently missing?
What I'm currently
Sorry,
missing.
what was you currently missing? Yeah.
I mean, it's not that we're missing something. We're doing quite well, but we definitely always welcome, more voices from underserved, voices from across the UK. I think the entire industry could do better on disability. It's just like, if you think about it, you just want more in the ecosystem that has a different point of view. And that's BBC3's role. It always has been.
To more of that. And I'm just kind of, as we start to wrap up, because I see that we're kind of reaching the time, and it has been a really fascinating, fantastic conversation. As BBC3 content evolves and the industry evolves, technology evolves, are you kind of in future, or even now, future commissions now, thinking about how AI or immersive content plays into the audience experience? And what kind of things are you thinking, or how is that starting? How are you starting to explore that?
Yeah, and so the BBC there's a new work stream in the BBC about dealing with AI in terms of pitching ideas. I'd say to suppliers, when you're pitching at the outset, make it clear if you're intending to use AI, and then we'll plug you into the right team at the BBC. It's definitely a consideration, and we definitely want to hear from creatives at the outset when they pitch something where they think they may use that kind of technology, or where that technology might come in. There've been a couple of things we've got, and it's been very clear where it might be AI driven. But it's not the mainstay currently. It hasn't, that takeover or whatever hasn't happened yet. It's still very human driven. And even when you look at kind of iPlayer as a platform, there's very much the human touch.
I just wondered if there was room for kind of explorative ways of
Yeah, I think there is room. 100%,
immersive.
there's room. You just
Yeah.
got to make it clear from the outset, and obviously think about the genre that you're pitching to, and make it clear from the outset in your pitch that you might want to use this, you might want to explore that, or even if it's just an editorial piece of editorial around just exploring AI. Just make it clear, right? I think everyone's open to innovation.
Wonderful. And then lastly, if we want to pitch to BBC3, what's the best approach and the best way to get your attention, or the best way to make sure that our ideas are seen or shining? So, what's any advice around that?
I would say, well, first of all, before you even pitch, just make sure you put your idea through the filter of, what would really work and make people click on demand from a thumbnail and a title. Got to think about people's time, particularly under 35s, being consumed by TikTok, YouTube, and our, SVOD competitors. And so it's like, why would anyone come to your stuff, and what's the leverage you're going to use to bring people and point them to your piece of content if fingers crossed it does get commissioned. So really think hard, have a look at what we do. I always say to people, you'd be surprised how many people don't look at what we do, don't even watch some of our stuff, and then when you meet them, they're citing titles from 10 years ago, and that never eternally fails to amuse me. So it just never I'm just amazed when people do that, because I sort of think, you haven't really watched our stuff, have you? But the best way is, once you kind of put your idea through that filter of thinking, actually, why would BBC want to work with us on this? Then, drop one of our genre commissioners a line. And if you look on bbc.co.uk/commissioning, you'll see the kind of teams. And it's always good to, I know it can seem quite clinical, but it's just good to see the faces and names of people. And then, and what they've commissioned before, because then you'll understand, like, maybe where the shape of your idea might sit. So there's no point pitching a kind of, a big current affairs piece to, somebody in fact tank, because that's just not what they do, right? So it's just understanding even that, and, drop a line to them. And if you want, you can drop me a line. That's not a problem at all. And I can then kind of put you in touch with somebody in one of the genres. But yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Naz. And just to pick up on that point about, it sounds so basic, but Mel stressed it the other day, that point of going in to see a commissioner who doesn't know, you haven't watched their program, right? Or going to pitch something, you haven't watched the channel's program, or you haven't read the commissioning brief. It's kind of mistake. It's like schoolgirl mistakes, but so easily done. So make sure you really research the client, the channel that you're pitching to, and make sure that you understand their sensibilities, because often that's why programs are turned down, not necessarily because the idea is wrong, it's just that it hasn't been tweaked or matched to that sensibility of that channel.
Yeah,
Nasfim,
definitely,
thank you.
definitely. And the other thing to say is, people forget, they think, oh, you work at the BBC and you've got a nice, commissioning job. It's like, you guys come with such preparation and, like, okay, I'm gonna, come and pitch to us. But I'm also nervous meeting you guys. It's like, what are they gonna kind of, I'm publicly funded by the great, British license fee payer. And it's like, I'm kind of like, oh, what are they going to ask me? What are they going to want from me? And so but I always do my research before I meet someone. Like I met a new indie today, as I said earlier on, 2 amazing men of color, and I've never met them before, but I read before I went into that meeting. Believe me, I did read up on who they were. It's like, and so I feel like I wish more people would do the same of us sometimes. Understand that like we're giving you that time, and sometimes we come from incredibly difficult meetings about legal or finance, and then we have to really switch on and meet you guys in the 30-minute Zoom meeting that we've got with you. And I'm always amazed at how some people might think, like, I appreciate it's hard, but equally, it's like we should all be respectful to each other, because sometimes I sort of wonder why, that it feels like perhaps that I might have a big cup to kind of pour from, but sometimes I'm just exhausted too. And I know a lot of commissioners and a lot of creatives feel that way, and we're really trying hard. And so it's just to have that understanding of where we're coming from, because we try to understand you, because and actually it's quite intimidating for us to meet creatives from the industry, because we know that there's such a yearning to make stuff and people to kind of get into the industry and work in the industry. So it can be quite a tough thing for us, but equally I hope that people can kind of give us a bit of that due back, because it can be tough for us to, I don't know if that makes sense, but
I mean, one of the learning, no, but definitely, I think, and I'm just to reiterate that, I think one of the learnings that one of the running themes is that the commission in that relationship is more kind of collaborative than competitive. And I think oftentimes people feel like they've got to go in and convince you to think their way. And actually that can throw in the idea about and being collaborative and understanding what you want and you understanding what the creative wants is probably the best way to win a commission. And I think that's a theme that's been coming up time and time again. So I just think that you spoke to that it's not that, you're not here to fight anybody. You're, but just kind of give me a little bit of slack and let's work together to get to the ideas.
yeah,
that we
totally.
want.
And it's like, it's not like, I mean, it's just me that's doing the giving. Or people like me. If I'm saying I'm not amazing, there are plenty of amazing people, but it's like you've also got something to give too, right? You've got something to sort of fill us up with as well. So don't think it's an imbalanced kind of thing just because I'm employed by the BBC. I think you guys are as valuable. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, but yeah, everybody's, and that's what I love, that everybody's equal in this ecosystem, and it's important that we all kind of play our part respectfully and understand that we all have value, right? And we all bring something to the table. I think it's really important, and I to hear from you at your position to kind of re-emphasize that, I think it's really important and really affirming for people to understand that actually when I come to see Nasfim, she sees and recognizes that I have something valuable to bring to the table, as we all do.